Okay, when we get to the public hearing, I'll ask Marie to call out the names in order. And we'll talk more about that when we get to the public hearing. But first of all, I would like to recognize Marie Wood and ask her to do the invocation.
Let us pray. Our Heavenly Father, you're such an awesome God, and we owe you everything. As we gather here tonight, may we conduct this meeting in a positive manner as to glorify your name. May everyone here tonight leave with a full understanding of the redevelopment plan and what it can do for the city of Mount Airy. Please guide us in everything we say and do this evening. In Christ Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Please stand for the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have the minutes available from our October 14th, 2015 and our November 18th, 2015 meeting. I think you've had a chance to look at it. Everybody should have gotten copies of those by email. Are there any changes that need to be made? If not, we'll need a motion to approve.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes as presented.
Is there a second? Okay, there's a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you. Before we get to the public hearing, I would like Alton Gaither to just give us a summary to read the West Side Redevelopment Plan Executive Summary, and then we'll get started with the public hearing. Alton.
Good evening. West Side Redevelopment Plan Executive Summary. This is a comprehensive development plan for the West Side redevelopment area that meets the goals set forth in 160A, Article 22, 500, and 526, as amended to the revitalize the redevelopment area as approved by the Mount Airy Planning Board. This plan will consist of eliminate dilapidated structures and encourage new investments. Develop a gateway to the downtown that leads through the newly renovated area. Develop a pedestrian connection between the downtown and the Greenway. Encourage redevelopment of market rate rental housing. Expand improvement opportunities while preserving existing jobs. Encourage preservation of historic buildings and own the National Register. That's on the National Register of the Historic Places. Number 7, upgrade water and sewer services in the area. In support of this plan, the following actions will be taken. Establish a demolition grant program to encourage the removal of deteriorating structures. Establish a facade grant program modeled after the successful program MAD used in the MSD to encourage owners to fix up the exterior of their buildings. Number 3, acquire by voluntary action land required to construct a roundabout at South Pine Street and Franklin Street. Number 4, work with qualified developers to redevelop the historic Spencer property into a market rate apartments, hotel and convention center, and performing arts, civic, business, incubator, center within estimated private investment of $35 million with the creation of over 60 jobs. This plan will take several years to implement, while voluntary land acquisition, environmental remediation, and planning should be an ongoing process. Public sector project construction improvement by the city of Mount Airy and Surrey counties should be undertaken until binding agreements are reached with developers to help offset public construction costs identified in the plan. This process will require agreements with multiple funding sources. This agreement will not be made until private investors are committed and may include: number one, CDBG block grant funds for the water and sewer updates. Number two, North Carolina DOT for improvements on state maintained streets. And number three, an interlocal cooperative agreement between the City of Mount Airy and Surrey County to use additional real estate tax revenue that will be paid to the city and county as a result of private investments to repay loans for the required public sector work not paid out of grant funds. That is the West Side Development Executive Plan as presented September 9th, 2015.
Thank you, Alvin. I'd like to call on Vice Chair Chip Williams for a few comments.
Mayor Rowe is not able to be here tonight. He called this morning and asked that I read some previously prepared statements that he has completed and sent to me today. I have already given a copy of this to our secretary and will be made a part of the minutes for our meeting tonight. His comments are as follows. Before this public hearing begins, I would like to introduce some information having relevance to the development of the Spencer's property. One of the considerations of the West Side Development Plan has been the construction of a roundabout in the Pine Street and South Street intersection, which is state-owned and does not belong to the city. The future of this area has been of great concern to property owners, citizens, and potential developers who envisioned a roundabout constructed in this area. However, what happens in this area is strictly up to the North Carolina DOT. To gather information on their plans, staff and I visited with NCDOT's District Engineer Mike Pettyjohn and Traffic Control Engineer Dean Ledbetter. The DOT's position regarding a roundabout is that construction of a gateway or a roundabout will not happen because of more than adequate traffic capacity of surrounding streets. This leaves us using current streets as access to the proposed development. Obvious access is Independence Boulevard to Willow Street. The next question then becomes the effect of this access on potential developers. Independently, the current potential developers, Ken Reeder and Dana Bryson, called me by way of introduction. During our conversations, I discussed that we could not offer something we could not control. Upon hearing the explanation of what potential access we did have and did control, both were more than satisfied with what we could provide. The lack of a roundabout or gateway approach did not terminate their interest or willingness to proceed with negotiations. The conversations ended on a very positive note, with a promise to move ahead as rapidly as possible. The change in access leaves the property owners in the Pine and South Street area unaffected and will save the city the potential cost of Cousie's building and the destruction thereof, as well as construction and associated costs estimated to be as high as $2.5 million. It is my hope that the committee will consider incorporating these revisions into their plans for the redevelopment of the Spencer's property. Respectfully submitted, Mayor David Rowe.
Thank you, Chip. Before we open the public hearing, I will ask that when you come up to speak, please come up to the microphone and state your name, address, and whether or not you live in the city. And I'll ask Marie Wood to call the names in order. I declare the public hearing on the West Side Redevelopment Plan open. Marie?
Okay. First on the list is Claude and Shirley Brinkley.
I just put my name on there because there may be discussion that I would later like to ask questions about. I don't have a whole lot to say right now, but I would like to hear what others have to say.
Second on the list is Diana Quinn.
Same as Shirley, I didn't come with a speech, but I wanted to be able to speak if the need be. I request that my name be moved to the bottom of the list.
Jean Clark.
Yes, I'm on the bottom of the list. Good evening, Commissioners. How are you? I'm Gene Clark. I'm a citizen of the city. I've got a couple of questions, and they're probably more directed to Mr. Campbell or anybody, because it has to do with the redevelopment law. We've heard repeatedly that the problem or the challenge is that the redevelopment area has already been certified, and that it can't be certified, it cannot be changed without going back and starting all over. I've looked over the redevelopment law. It really doesn't say that in the law. So where does that come from? Where does that wording, that terminology, that definitive saying that it can't be changed at this point, where does it come from?
You want to address the question? Okay. I guess for purposes of the audience, let me start by defining terms. There are two aspects to a redevelopment plan. One is the redevelopment area, which is literally a circle on the map. And that redevelopment area is certified by the planning board, and then the redevelopment area is presented to the redevelopment commission, and the redevelopment commission takes that area as the area of operation and develops a plan to address redevelopment within those boundaries. So the answer to the question is, there's a formula in the statutes of how the redevelopment area begins. It begins with the certification by the planning board.
And the certification is to whom?
The certification is to the redevelopment area, to the redevelopment commission. And so I think truly part of, there's nothing explicitly in the statutes that says the redevelopment area can't be changed. But nor is there anything in the redevelopment statutes that says at this stage of the proceedings, the redevelopment area can be modified. At this stage of the redevelopment plan, the area can be modified. I think the intent of the redevelopment law is the plan can be accepted, rejected, or modified in two stages in the process. And that's pretty clear. The plan can change. But I think if you assume that the area can be changed, then you're assuming that the whole thing can just be thrown out at any point. And I don't think that's the intent. I think the intent is to fix the area, and then there's a lot of latitude about what happens within the area in terms of the plan.
Right.
But we researched this, and I've talked to the school government, Taiwan and school government. I've looked at a case like there's just no legal authority to change the area once it is certified by the plan.
Okay. So, then the next thing is the redevelopment zone. That's the next, that's the other part of the puzzle. The redevelopment commission can choose to submit a plan that just covers the city-owned property. Is that correct? And ignore the private property. They could do that and the plan would move forward, correct? Or it could move forward without any delay.
I'll use an analogy that I've used before, and if you bear with me, I hope it makes sense. It's the analogy of a garden. A garden.
Okay.
Okay. The redevelopment area is like the garden. You put a fence around it, you plow it up, and there's your garden. That's the area. The plan is what you do in your garden. You can plant seeds in one section, you can put fertilizer in another section, you can leave part of it fallow for the next one. So the redevelopment plan is the implementation of what happens within the garden.
Whether it's in all at once or in 2 phases, 3 phases,
Right.
whatever.
I think the limiting factor or the consideration is that the planning board, the redevelopment plan, once it's adopted here, goes
Right.
back to the planning board.
Correct.
The planning board has to make findings and certify, among other things, that the redevelopment plan as presented does address blight and achieve the purposes of the redevelopment law.
Right.
So this board is held accountable by the planning board and ultimately by the city commissioners to make sure that the plan does address the concerns within the area.
And the planning board,
Well, let me just finish.
No, I'm sorry.
And so ultimately, you're right, it does come down to an allocation of resources and a placement of resources. But there is that check and balance of does the plan address blight and address the purposes of
Right. But once the blighted area is set or the redevelopment area is set, and if you were to say you move back just to the city-owned property, those other areas are still included in the redevelopment area,
They're
correct?
still in the area, that's correct.
And they still are considered in the blighted area.
They're
That's
still
a
in
true
the area.
statement, right?
They're still in the redevelopment area.
Okay, all right. But we really don't know. I mean, and I guess the question I'm getting at, because I've had the same conversations with Tyler myself. I've called him myself. And he couldn't answer the question about changing it either. He said it would take some time to research that. The assumption, in my opinion, is if it's not stated that you can't change it, then you can do whatever you want to until you're told you can't. You know, so as I like to do the analogies, it's easier to ask forgiveness than ask permission. You know, until you're told you can't do it, you can't do it. And I think that, you know, there's been a lot put out in the public that says it can't be changed. Well, that's not quite true. It can be changed. There's a process to go through to change it, or we've developed our own process. That's what it sounds like, that we've got to go back to Plan 1. Back to the planning board. The planning board determines the area, correct?
Correct.
Where do they get their input from to determine the area?
Well, in this case, the redevelopment commission gave them an area of focus, but it was ultimately up to the planning board
Right.
to draw that.
But the redevelopment commission did give a recommendation to it, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I want to get that clear because that's been a bone of contention too, that everybody says it didn't come from the redevelopment commission, it came from the planning board. In the August 2014 meeting of the RDC, they had a choice of whether to choose the Spencer's property to expand it a little bit or to expand the whole area. So it generated from here. Whether the planning board certified it or not is not the issue. So I want to make sure we got that point in tonight too, that it did generate from this committee.
And I think the planning board ultimately expanded the area after they did their analysis. So there was a recommendation for west side redevelopment, and the planning board defined that area themselves. It was different than the recommendation of
What was different than option 3? Do you know?
the,
Because that's the one they chose, that this group chose in August of 14. Yeah, I know. I'm all right. Well, getting back to my point, I'm speaking on behalf of our alliance that we formed. And we've been very consistent about our objections being included in the redevelopment area. You know, we represent over 60% of the property owners down there, so we have a majority. We just don't want to be in it. You know, we feel like it's our right. From the very beginning, we have not been dealt with in a way we felt like it's fair. There have been several issues and situations that have come up, not necessarily dealing with the redevelopment commission, but others that have been involved that have made misleading statements. We just want to make sure that everybody understands that we're on record that we do not want to be included. Let us decide about our projects.
May I ask a question?
You certainly may.
Why do you not want to be in the redevelopment area?
Well, there's a couple things. Number one is there are covenants in that redevelopment plan that those property owners have to meet. As far as the facade, as far as the facades and that type of thing. If I were to build something on that property, if I were to take the demolition grant that's been proposed and tear it down, then when I come back to build on that property, I've got to follow strict, stringent guidelines that are laid out by this redevelopment plan. Facade, the surroundings, the landscaping, plans have to be submitted to the planning department, very detailed plans, they have to be approved by the planning department. And that's one of the issues. As far as the incentive, you have to do that in the department. Well, but I'm not planning on doing anything other than keeping it like this,
Well, then you don't have a problem.
I understand that, but we ought to have a choice. We didn't create this situation. The city chose to buy the Spencer property. The city chose to form the redevelopment commission. The city council, as a majority, have told you guys that they don't want to consider anything outside of the city-owned property. So to continue this process, in my mind, and I think in our group's mind, is a waste of time. I mean, quite frankly, the only reason this public hearing, in my opinion, is today instead of 2 or 3 months ago, was to see what happened with the election. That was brought into the process. So, I think, when the discussion gets out that as the property owners, we are narrow-minded and backwards and are against progress, that's not true. We're 100% behind the city-owned property. That's city dollars. That doesn't affect our investments. What it does affect is our retirements and what we've done to buy these properties. And we may not be able to go forward to do and meet the covenants and restrictions and whatever the city may come up and decide to do later on. And I understand, that according to Title I, that the RDC could go forward and present an area of development just for the Spencer property and not address the other area. The planning board, they can do that without messing up the plan. The only problem with that is the property owners are still included in the redevelopment area. And I want to make sure you understand that we are resolved to address this issue however we need to. And we want the city to prosper. We want the city to grow. But it is our property. And we should have the right to say whether our property is included. That's our choice. Spencer's property, community owns, then do what you want to do. I also think, as a group, and I don't know how this has come about, but I think because of the way some of this has been handled, whether it's the RDC or the city council or commissioners or individual members, it's added a air of what's the word I'm looking for? It's made it not very clean. It's muddied the waters. And I'll give you a couple examples. In May, the city council had a closed session and discussed the purchase of Cousins property. In August, an auction appears for this property prior to the plan even being introduced to the community. In September, the DOT has 2 roundabouts on their project list. 2 weeks after the plan's introduced. I talked to the people at the DOT and asked them, when does that have to be submitted to the DOT? Well, it had to be submitted by the end of August. Well, why are these roundabouts getting submitted to the DOT before the plan's been introduced? It's a draft plan. It hadn't had a public hearing. So how do we know what's going to happen? And then when you ask, that there were 2 commissioners that were at this particular meeting in September, and when you asked in the room, how did this get on the list? Because we asked the DOT, you know, who recommends it? They said a recommendation came from the city council. Well, neither one of the commissioners in the room said they didn't know, you know, they didn't say anything. They didn't know, nobody knew how it got on there. So, you know, all of this going down the list, that's not conspiracy theories, those are facts. Those are facts that things actually did happen. And then in October, we still got a draft plan. We haven't had a public hearing, but we bring in 4 developers that are gonna tell us all the great things they're gonna do. Well, that's really good, but don't you think you ought to get the public input before you get the developers input? I mean, you know, that's just a little getting ahead of yourself. And last, I will say this, I've heard about how, you know, how bad some of the property looks, you know. Let me think of the 2 statements that was made to me. One of them was, well, you know, you've got to address all this property because these property owners, you know, if these developers come in here and spend this money, they're going to, you know, they don't want you to have to drive by a piece of property that looks bad. Well, maybe what we ought to do is go down to the Main Street over here, about 2 blocks, and get Gene Reese to do it. Because I don't think when Gene bought the Renfro plant, he worried about the Spencer's plant with those tractor trailers and those cars coming in the parking lot, those employees walking back across the street. He developed that, and he wasn't worried about it. He built it and sold it, and he's doing it again right now, regardless of what happens here. So, you know, that argument doesn't hold water, I guess is what I'm saying. It's time for this to stop. It really is. And you have the ability to do that. Now, my gut feeling is, what's going to happen tonight is, it's not going to go anywhere. You're going to try to stall a little bit longer and see if you can't talk some of the property owners in there. That would be a very poor choice. Because we're tired of waiting too. We want the city to move. And we want it to move now. There's no reason for it not to. And I certainly hope you will take those comments as they're meant. I know I'll probably get a little emotional. I love Mount Airy. And I think you guys, for the most part, have done an outstanding job. But it is our property. And we're going to defend our property, no matter what it takes. Thank you.
Is it time for me, Marie?
No, next on the list is Jerry Taylor. You moved yourself to the bottom. Said after the rest of them speak, you can, okay? Jerry Taylor.
Good evening. I'm Jerry Taylor, and I live at 102 Plantation Place. And as most of you know, I was a candidate for an unsuccessful candidate for a commissioner in the November election. I supported the RDC from the start, hoping to give voters a clear choice between someone who was in favor of the RDC and the incumbents who were on record as not supporting the developing West Side redevelopment plan. As with any life event where you come up short, you step back and you look at what you did, the election or any other life event, and you try to figure out what you could have done differently to get a different outcome. So I stepped back, and a couple of things stood out to me about the recent election. Number one, there was a tremendous amount of misinformation generated by the local newspaper and a small group of other citizens. Number two, and the most important, is that 612, that number, 612 people managed to see through all the bullshit and voted for redevelopment. So for me, and that's just me, my opinion, that's a vote of confidence for the RDC, the planning board, and the West Side redevelopment plan. Thank you.
Next on the list is Lizzie Morrison.
I'm Lizzie Morrison, and I live within the city limits. I just wanted to share, we posted to the Mount Airy Redevelopment page and then shared that several times on other pages, that if you could describe the redevelopment plan in a few words, how would you describe that plan? Some of the words that people wrote were innovative, beneficial, essential, smart, repurpose, regenerate, creative, revitalized, necessary, visionary, crucial, restorative, insightful, forward-thinking, sustainable, and prosperous. So I just wanted to thank you all on the Redevelopment Commission and Hugh for working so hard on this plan. Most of the people up here are volunteers, and I'm sure that it would be troubling to count the hours and how much time that y'all spent on this plan for the benefit of the city. So I just wanted to thank y'all.
Mr. Deese, is that correct?
My name is Craig Deese. I live at 329 Rockford Street, right down the road, and I moved to this town to put in a restaurant, the Loaded Goat, and believed in this town and believed in what I saw down the road, and I've been hearing a lot about this, and I'm learning as I go. I am no expert on this whole enterprise that's going on, but there's a guy from Cleveland who saw a town that was down and out, not that this is, and some of the things that went to rebuild that. You know, I will say, however the landowner goes, I understand landowners, they got their rights. We've got the Spencer project that the city owns. It was troubling to me when I went to the last council meeting, and one of the councilmen said, well, we don't even know what we want for the property yet. So I don't understand how you can take bids on developing something that you don't know what you're going to sell it for starters. Number two, I will say that no matter what happens there, if it's housing, if it's a hotel, if it's a convention center, you can't convince me that driving hundreds of people to the downtown area is not going to benefit everybody in that downtown area. It's going to, whether they're going around the corner to buy antiques or to buy a t-shirt or buy a hamburger or to buy a bottle of wine. You can't convince me of that. So I think as a newbie in this town, you know, and again, I don't know all the deep details of it. What I will say is, you know, let's get this thing going, whatever that is. Determine what we want to use it for, whether it is a hotel or if it's a mall or whatever that is. And I will say something as a guy that came into town and did not spend $12 million to start my business or whatever that number of they're going to spend this much money to me is an arbitrary number. I don't care if they're going to spend $100 if it's going to invest in the community, make some jobs, make it a better place to live. I don't care if it's $12 million. I mean, you can throw $100 million at junk. So to me, you know, I thought goodwill bids were put in. I think those have to be taken seriously. I think those people have to be treated with respect. They're the ones that are, I mean, I know myself as a small business owner, the thought of putting $12 million in anything, to think that I'm willing to write that check tells you that they know what, at least on the surface, that you would think that they would know what they're doing, and they don't have money falling out of their pockets to do that. So, you know, I am proud to be part of this community now, and I hope that we can move forward and get something going on down there that's going to benefit the whole downtown area as we move forward. Thank you.
Okay, Shirley, you're up.
I can see y'all up there, not me. I can step for a minute. You want me here or up there?
Doesn't matter. Make your choice.
All right, guys, first of all, let me say to everyone, I do know that respect is shown to all of the people that want to develop. I mean, the city commissioners show respect, you all show respect. What kind of people would we be if we wanted to develop our city and not show the respect to the people that really are interested? And I think that's the quality of our people. And I want to thank you all for what you've done. I do want to go back to where a comment was made by Jean at the department, when we went to the Department of Transportation Rural Division, questions were asked. How did this get in? How did the roundabout get in? Well, the roundabout got in because someone did put it in, and it had to be on the board. I was one of the commissioners. I did not know how it got in or who put it in. It was decided. Steve got it in. Steve happens to be on this committee. He is doing his job, and I am not trying to make it look like that we did something underhanded, because we did not. I did not know how it got in or who put it in until that day. I have questioned the roundabout. You all know this from day one. I have questioned the amount of traffic that went in. I've checked on the studies, and because of that, I'm familiar with the statistics on this. I'm going to go back to a few comments, and this group wanting to have their items taken out, their property taken out. And I'm just going to make a comment here, and I need some help on this, if I may, Hugh. The comment that our mayor said is, "It is my hope that the committee will consider incorporating these revisions into their plans for the redevelopment of Spencer's property." And what he's talking about is the changing of the direction into the city. I believe that's what he's trying to say here. And that Pine and South Street is unaffected. Because it's unaffected, and he's used the word revisions. I know the plan cannot be changed, but can revisions be made to the plan to take these properties owners out, since it's not going to be going in their area to start with? The direction of downtown is going Independence, it looks like, if we're going according to what the Department of Transportation says. So I'm asking this question: can you do revisions to the plan now that we know that this roundabout is not feasible?
Right, good question, and the answer is there are, from tonight, really 3 points where revisions can be made. The point of the public hearing tonight, of course, is for this board to receive public input, and so this plan tonight could be revised by this board, for example. The plan, once it's finalized, is sent to the planning board. The planning board can accept, reject, or modify, and then it goes back to land on your desk as city commissioner. Same options: accept, reject, or modify the plan at that point. So there are opportunities for this plan to be changed. But remember what I said earlier, that the plan can be changed, the allocation of resources can be changed in the garden, but the boundaries of the garden, the area, that has been fixed. So that the area, the perimeter of what we're talking about here, that can't be changed until everything comes to the city council. And if the city council says, not accepting this plan, don't like the area, then there's a process, I guess, would start all over again with recertifying a new area, putting a fence around a new garden, and starting over.
So you've got a fence around the garden.
Right.
Okay, which includes all of these houses and these businesses.
Right.
Okay, and we've planted everything in there.
Nothing's planted yet.
All right.
There's nothing. And
So we're revising. If we want to revise, we can.
Can revise the plan. So you can allocate resources, for example, to say, redevelopment is not going to include any resources on the west end of the redevelopment area, for example.
Okay.
I'm throwing that. Or, right now, there's the incentive grant for the revitalization zone. The city could say, we're not allocating any resources to that, we're just going to leave that fallow, we're not going to do anything in that area. Those properties are still in the redevelopment area, but there's no resources being allocated there. So, what happens within the area ultimately will be up to this board and the city council to decide what's done within the area.
Okay, so the final question for me to understand. The mayor requesting that the committee would consider the revisions. This is where you all make the decision that revisions could be made concerning the roundabout and the new entrance into the city. Is that correct? Not using Pine and South Street.
this is one of the opportunities where that could be discussed and taken out, and that's up to this board as a policy decision tonight after receiving public input.
So this is in the garden,
Right?
all right. And these businesses are in the garden.
Right?
Okay. So could those not also be in the revision?
In the revision, I mean, they can't change the area.
Not trying to.
Changing the allocation of resources or changing what happens within the plan, yes. That's up to,
Don't we have an obligation to correct the problems that were identified? Yeah. I mean, isn't that what the redevelopment commission is supposed to, we come up with a plan to do that?
and that's what I said, that's the check and balance, is that there's a plan, it goes to the planning board, and the planning board has to make the determination that this plan addresses the problems that have been identified. And the city council has the same obligation, once the area is identified, to do what they deem is appropriate with the resources that are available to address the issues.
I'm not going to make you repeat that a third time. Thank you very much.
Diana Quinn.
Hi, Diana Quinn. I'm here again in opposition to this plan. I stood at the polls from the time they opened until the time they closed, and the voters spoke resoundingly, and I have every confidence that the men and women I voted for are men and women of integrity, and they meant what they said, and they said what they meant, and they'll do the right thing. I stand with Jimmy and his property rights. And I hope this board does the right thing and puts this to bed once and for all. I like all of y'all, but I've been tired of seeing you. Thank you.
Jean Reese, you came in late. Do you want an opportunity to speak? I'm just, anybody that came in late and didn't get a list, on the list.
Marie, I would like an opportunity to speak after Jimmy. No, I want to hear what you got. I don't have anything to say. Well, then I'm presenting.
My name is Gene Reese. I live at 305 Marion Street. I'm not planning the street, but just a couple of points I think are important. Number one, I think it's, and I certainly respect the rights. I have a fair amount of property down in this area too that would be affected by the success or failure of this redevelopment plan. And I cannot overemphasize how difficult a project of this scope is for a town this size, and how difficult historic preservation is on something that's 300,000 square feet. I think we're unrealistic to think that everything's going to be smooth in this process. And again, Spark is good. Everyone there is a good friend of mine whose properties are affected. My properties are affected also on Market Street and Spencer's. But my only point is we have to keep our eye on the ball. This process is complicated. The development of this type of mill is complicated. We have a timeline to deal with, and there's just not a lot of room for much public discord in this kind of development. For myself, I've staked myself out heavily in a financial sense on the Spencer property. There's no open incentives. I would like to have been in the redevelopment zone. I requested to be in, and Andy advised me not to because our project was running ahead of your schedule. And so we're not in it. But nevertheless, the development we're doing at Spencer's will be a $3 or $4 million investment. And regardless of whether this project is successful or the redevelopment is successful or not, I'm going forward with that. But what I would ask of the affected property owners and of the commissioners and of this commission is, again, keep our eye on the long-range goal is to develop this entire west side of town. I don't see a lot negative from wherever the boundary is. I think that's a decision for this board and the planning board and the commissioners, and very much have a lot of respect for all of you and the difficulty in that decision. But wherever that boundary is critical that that decision be done in a timely manner, that this thing not go back to square one and kill 6 or 8 months of this development time. Because when the historic preservation tax credits expire in 2022, they expire, and I can tell you this project will expire. So this project, the entire Spencer development has to be concluded by that deadline. So again, the decision of where the boundary goes is your decision and the commissioner's decision. But I guess I'm very partial to downtown, have some recognition of how important this project is for the town. I think we work about 2,000 people downtown. It's the largest concentration of property value in the city of Mount Airy, I think. I may stand corrected, about $35–40 million property value currently. So if Spencer's successful, there's potential for that to go up 50%, possibly be doubled over time. So I think it's important to see the economic impact of this. If we had a plant coming here to work 1,500 to 2,000 people, to invest $20 or $30 million, we'd all be dancing in the street. And that's what we're looking at here. So we have a downtown that currently has property value at that level and employment at that level, and we potentially can increase that property value by 50 or 100%. For myself, I'm willing to take the risk to do my development with the hope that this commission and the board will do this development right. And I certainly have enough respect for this board and the commissioners not to abuse the property rights of the property owners on South Street. I certainly understand that. I just don't see a lot of risk in it. I have a lot of confidence in you folks and the commissioners to look after these property rights of all the property owners, including my property rights. And I can speak for myself. I will keep my eye on the ball. I do recognize this is a very long-term project, and I hope 5 years or 10 years from now, whatever is decided by this commission and city board, that the right decision has been made and that it's positive for everybody on Main Street and South Street and Franklin Street and the community as a whole. But I just want to thank you for what y'all do and thank the commissioners for what they do. And everyone's gotten roughed up in this a little bit, but I think we can all hold our head high. And I hope when we're done, we have something to be proud of. Thank you.
First of all, I concur with Jim. I agree we got to do something. I think I've said that before. You know, it would be a shame to have to start over. But I just heard Gene say something that kind of piqued my interest. It was up to the Redevelopment Commission and the Planning Board to get this right. My opinion is, and like I said, I'm not as well versed as you are here, but if the law doesn't say you can't change the area, I think you can. I think if you wanted to, who is going to challenge it outside of Mount Airy and Surrey County? Is the state going to come up here and challenge that we change the redevelopment area? Why would they do that? That makes no sense for them to challenge it.
I don't give legal advice based on whether or not it's going to be challenged.
Okay.
I give my best legal opinion, that's my best legal opinion.
Okay. Well, I hear what you're saying. Based on that the certification that the planning board has sent, can the planning board amend their certification? Can the planning board do that?
No, I don't believe so. Once it's been certified, I don't believe so. I think because they don't get it back to look at that. In other words, the next time anything goes to the planning board, it will be the plan itself, and they will respond to the plan.
So right now, if the redevelopment commission votes tonight to send a plan like this, we know that the roundabout will not happen because of the DOT, or most likely will not happen. It goes to the planning board. The planning board says it meets all the, they say it meets all the criteria of the planning department. And then it goes to the city council. And based on the public statements that the commissioners have made, a majority of them said they don't support the extended area. So what's the timeline then? It goes back to the planning board?
You're asking me to speculate on something I don't know. The city council will have another public hearing. They'll get the public input, and they'll make a decision as to what to do with that. I don't know.
All right. So, I mean, I'm just trying to figure out if the commissioners, if the city council has said they're not going to support it, you know, it's dead on arrival, for lack of better words.
Well, the city council has the opportunity to accept, reject, or amend.
Okay, but they amended, but it still includes the private property. Because you can't change the redevelopment area.
We change the area, may change what, if anything happens.
So then the private property owners have to exercise whatever options they've got. So what does that do in the timetable if they choose to exercise those options?
Can't answer.
I don't, we all know the answer, nobody wants to say it, but it delays the project. So we would rather see it fail because we can't figure out a way to change it versus honoring those private property owners who have since, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I think in that closed session in May, the city commissioners, the majority of them, stated they didn't support it. So May of 15, the officials in the city knew they had an issue with the area they were working on. That's a fact. That's in, I think the date of the meeting was May the 27th, if I'm not mistaken. And then publicly, in August, a majority of the commissioners said it again. So we've had over 7 months or 8 months to go back to square one. And now because we're too stubborn to do it, it's going to be the private property owner's fault because you didn't get what you wanted. I don't believe that. And as Gene just said, it could be another 6 or 8 months. I would strongly hope that if you don't do the right thing, that the commissioners will consider starting over. And that would be my recommendation to them.
I hate to butt in again, but you know, I'm having a hard time sitting up here like this. You know, I've lost a lot of sleep over this. I have, from the very beginning, wanted to dedicate my time to make sure that something positive happens to the city of Mount Airy. And in doing so, there's a process you go through. We were asked to be a part of this. All of us were asked to be a part of this commission. Only to see that good comes out of this project. From the very beginning, we have been, first of all, the public didn't want the commission. Okay. Then we got eminent domain problem. Then we've got boundary problems. We got people that don't want to be in it. We're sitting up here as a group we visited cities to see how these projects could continue on to make it better for the city of Mount Airy. And there's not one city that hasn't had problems with redevelopment. Now, none of us have done this before. I will be here the first one to admit there are things that we could have done different. But I happen to think that if you go toward the positive end of things instead of the negative end of things, you come out better off. Now, along this process, this is a plan. It is a drafted redevelopment plan put together with the laws that need to be in there. We will be discussing here in a few minutes some things that we may want to change before it goes to the planning. But I guarantee when we finish tonight, there will be negative coming out from somewhere because that's just been the process the whole time. I don't like to see that happen. We've got developers that are interested in the property, the Spencer's property. From the very beginning, the Spencer property has been the focus, okay? There are good people, good property owners, and have businesses that have been in that area for years. We've just been going through a recession that kicked everybody's butt. We don't want to see property owners hurt. And I have gone over my mind over and over we hurting the property owners by putting them in the area? Well, they say, there you go back again, said blighted areas and this and that. They're part of the law. The wording is part of the law. It's in there. But there's nobody on this commission, the city commission or the redevelopment commission, that wants to hurt any property owner. We have no desire to use eminent domain, and I hope that tonight we can put that to rest. I hope we can. And if it's a problem with the roundabout, it's a suggestion. It can be fixed. Can it not be fixed? Can we fix something?
It's already been fixed by the DOT.
Well, what I'm saying, fix it in the plan, okay?
Marie, the problem I think is we're too far down the road with too many problems. And I think unless we find a way to solve this, it's gonna keep getting worse. And as I told you in Chip, when y'all came to see me, and I appreciate you coming to see me, there's a lot of, I've heard it said tonight there was a lot of misinformation. And there has been a lot of misinformation on both sides. I won't disagree with that. But, and this goes back to the city commission, and this goes back to us, I had a city commissioner tell me something one time about the redevelopment commission. And it was about something you guys voted on. I don't think it was a commission. Well, I think it was a commissioner. I don't know. And his answer to me was, their answer to me was, well, we weren't told the right information. Well, ignorance is not an excuse. And I know you're volunteering. I volunteer, maybe not for the city, but I do volunteer in other things. And I work very hard, and it is a thankless job. There is no question about it. But I'm telling you guys, this is not going to go because it needs to be fixed. There's too much opposition, as you mentioned, Marie, from the very beginning. They didn't want a redevelopment commission. In actuality, the commissioners should have assumed that responsibility and avoided all this. They put you guys in a terrible position. And I think they realize. And I think if you went back and asked them, as I've been told in the past, the purpose of the redevelopment commission is to make it apolitical. It did everything but make it apolitical. It made it very political. And it did not serve the purpose it was developed for. There's too much water over the dam. And that, I think, is the issue. I don't think you can back it. And if we can either start today, January 13th, or we'll start June the 13th, or we'll start October the 13th. But as Jean said, the clock's ticking. And we have a choice to, cut our losses and get it right, or we can keep going down this road. But it's not going to get any prettier. Thank you.
Is anybody else on the list? Does anybody else wish to speak?
I'd like to make one short statement. There's something fundamentally wrong with development. When private property owners like Gene Clark, Sparky Paul, Mrs. Worth have to come down here for the better part of a year and beg like a dog for a bone for their God-given constitutional property rights.
Does anyone else wish to speak? If not, I declare the public hearing closed. I'll open the floor for discussion of the redevelopment plan.
Mr. Chairman, could I have a few words?
Certainly.
We have several items that we need to discuss. Number one is in the plan. there are several references to a gateway and a roundabout. Based on information we have gathered over the last few months and also over what Mayor Rowe disclosed or discussed in his written document that I read earlier, we can remove that reference or those references in that document, basically omitting it from our plan. I'd like to hear any, excuse me, I think we'd like to hear any comment about
I think Mayor Rowe was correct in his assumption with the DOT that the roads that are there today serve well, for what's there. But when the plan was put together, it was not based on what is there now, but what will be happening in the future. And so, it's not something that needs to go in at the present time, but I would hope that it could be left in so that it could be dealt with in the future if the Spencer development takes hold, especially if a theater goes in, you're going to have a way to get people in and out quickly, because of having an extra 500-600 people coming and going out there. So, what DOT is saying is truly correct. It's not needed today, but it may be needed in the future.
There are 3 intersections in Mount Airy that are on the DOT list for future study. It's Independence and South Street, Pine Street and South Street, and Independence and West Pine. So there are 3 intersections that are on the list already to be considered for scoring, but it won't happen for at least 5 years. And I think we need to have wording in our plan that will coincide with the wording in the DOT's plan that this intersection be further studied at the time when it comes about, because hopefully things are going to be a whole lot different in 5 years. And it won't be considered for 5 years anyway. And I think we need to leave it in there as a study to determine what is the best way to improve the traffic flow at these intersections.
The roundabout's not really that big of a deal to me. If the DOT wants to put in a roundabout, they will when the time's right. But I agree, it needs to be allowed to be studied in the future when all this stuff does take place. So if we need to take it out of the documents for now, what is that? Big deal, really. But bottom line is, DOT wants a roundabout, they won't stop like that, but
if we removed references to the gateway and the roundabout, would you be willing to add a sentence or a description of NCDOT studying further in the future?
I think so. That's the way it needs to be.
if you did remove that, you still have a dilapidated building to deal with. So, the roundabout solved 2 problems. It took the building out and also, corrected the potential future problem. But if you just eliminate it from the plan, you've got to go back and address how are you going to deal with that building.
There's a later motion that addresses that building that we'll make tonight.
Let's hear it all.
So I guess this has a 3rd element. One of the motions would be for this board to pass a motion to encourage the board of commissioners to act on the Cousins building act on the option that they have before them regarding the Cousins building immediately.
I'm not sure when the option expires, and this has to go to the planning board and then back to the board of commissioners.
I think that motion would be a separate, not part of this written document. I think that's a standalone option or standalone motion regarding the option on its own.
Okay. It's not in the plan.
Not in the plan.
Okay. Well, let's just worry about what's in the plan right now about the intersection. Any other discussion about it? Anyone want to make a motion to change it?
I say we make a motion to remove the wording from that reference. Roundabout. Just say it for a future date, because if the DOT wants a roundabout, they'll put it around.
Okay, putting that in the form of a motion. Okay.
Are you just removing the wording, or are you moving the budget figures and the whole thing?
So that's motion number 2.
Let's hear it all.
You gotta split it up. Can't be warehouse. Option number 2 is to remove the column in the financial projection spreadsheet that's in the document. That is one complete column that refers to the traffic circle area. They are expenses that are specific to a roundabout, and all that's in the expenses that are involved in that roundabout. And that can be removed. It can be added in later. It is figure 8 in the document. Give a little bit further information. It will be funds that are reapportioned, but it does remove. It does remove $2,266,800 from the projected expenses that are listed on that preliminary cost estimate.
But it also removes the demolition of the building and all the associated expenses with it. So you still have a blighted building there that we are not, if that's removed, we're not meeting the obligations that we have to deliver a complete plan to the plan.
Excellent point. In the demolition, we can't wait for that decision by the Board of Commissioners to move this thing forward as has been discussed, and as we so want to as well. That's another item that can be a line item addition at a later time. This is a working document, especially the finances. And Mr. Armbruster and I had a conversation last week, and I think I talked about the yin and the yang. And we have developers, and may have more developers that are going to come, and they're going to express their interest, and they're going to give us a wish list of what they want. We have no way of anticipating what that wish list is or how much that wish list is going to cost. This is just a preliminary projection. It will most likely change. It probably will have to change. There will be additions and subtractions. I think we are confident with the document, with the estimate sheet, cost sheet as it is. The motion or the thought is to remove the traffic circle area column from it, since we have just voted to, or since we're talking about voting to remove the gateway and the roundabout.
Again, we're not sending a complete plan to the planning board. And so, you know, we'll have to go back and work on the plan or revise the budget. You've got to deal with the issues that's been identified by the planning board in the area.
It's as complete as we know it to be right now, because we have no firm options on the table or the requirements to meet those options.
Oh, that's true, Chip, but, you know, we've got a major big building right in the center of it that's not being addressed.
But we can't do a thing with that building until the Board of Commissioners makes their decision
It doesn't.
what they are going to exercise on this option.
We still have to provide a plan to the planning board on what to do, or we're not meeting our obligation. It's irregardless of what actions are taken by other people. You know, the statutes are pretty clear here that we've got to present a complete plan to them. And just piecemealing it right now is something that's taken months of work to do is not what.
Well, understand, we could keep it in there, but the Board of Commissioners could remove it.
They can, but, you know, it would give us some more time to try to come up with a solution instead of right here on what to do. I mean, we've got to be able to present a concise plan that identifies all the problems. You know, they've identified the problems, now we got to find a solution to it. Leaving the building there without doing anything to it is, you know, we have not done our job.
Well, if you just change the wording, just take the gate, roundabout out, just the word roundabout out.
Sure.
Leave the cost in, because it says traffic circle area. If that comes along, if that happens, then the figures will be in there. Is there anything wrong with doing that?
You know, it's up to the city to fund it, or the state, or whoever to fund it, but, you know, we have to present a complete picture of how to fix the area. And it doesn't matter whether roundabouts put in or what, you know, how do you deal with the building? You know, I would go with Marie, and it needs to just stay in there until another solution is found.
What about change the wording, eliminate traffic circle and just say the intersections
Sure.
at Franklin and South and South and Pine?
That doesn't cause a problem at all, you know, because there's going to have to be additional study done on it. With their preliminary maps in here, they'll have to be revised by the final plan that's done anyway.
That would go along with what's on the DOT list.
Sure. You know, I think what Alton read on this summary was this is a very complicated project that's going to take a lot of years to implement, and it's going to take a lot of agencies to help do it. And that is, DOT will do whatever they're going to do. And that will reflect the budget. But, we got to do something with the building.
Okay. Well, there was a motion, I don't think it was ever seconded, so is there a second to Jared's motion?
I'll second that.
To Jared's. Okay, we'll open it back up for discussion.
Well, need the motion, please. Just to take the maps out, leave the numbers in, and when the time comes, to take out the word roundabout. And insert what? Intersection.
Okay. There's a motion and a second. There's any other discussion? We're clear on the motion?
Not me, I'm not totally clear on the motion.
Okay.
We're changing the wording to take out roundabout. And we're leaving the budget figures in for the traffic area. Are we taking circle out, or are we just, how are we
Taking that out.
identifying the cost on that area? Wording on the budget, it says traffic circle area. How do we address that? Do we leave it the same? Is the wording okay the way it is?
Intersection.
Okay, instead of traffic circle area, intersection. So,
Intersection.
And is that, just a clarification, is that in the document and the financial spreadsheet?
That's right.
Specify those two intersections, is that correct?
Intersection.
Both intersections, okay. Okay, is there any other discussion? Is everybody clear on the motion now? Okay. All in favor? Say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, thank you very much. Any other discussion? Jim, you want, anything you want to say? I have something.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm surprised there hasn't been a whole lot of, even though there was talk about property rights, there was not much mention of eminent domain tonight. And I would like to add something in there that hopefully will address that. Something like the Redevelopment Commission has no intention or desire to use the power of eminent domain under North Carolina General Statute 160A-15 within the proposed west side redevelopment area to effect the taking of private property for the purposes of economic development. And I think that'll be enough to. That has never been the intention, so I hope that'll, if that's in the document, hopefully that'll take care of any misunderstandings about it. So I'd like to make that as a motion.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay. Anything else?
In one section, there is one section of the financial spreadsheet that has been brought to our attention that we left unaddressed. And that was the improvements to Willow Street. That we don't know yet what those improvements will be, because we don't know yet what developers will request. We have addressed Franklin Street, the extension of Oak Street, but we failed to, just for no great purpose, we failed to address Willow Street. So I think we need to discuss if we want to add that now.
Both including financial and the wording.
We would need to address it in the body of the document. With no great detail because we don't know, but we have failed to, we have not addressed it, and we have not addressed it in the financial document.
Do you know what kind of improvements you're talking about, Jim?
Street, curbs, guttering, electric, water, sewer.
I don't think we have an idea of what we're doing on Willow. If you put any budget numbers on it, they had budget numbers for the traffic because they had an idea of what they want to do and where and how. We're going to be really limited what can be done there because the buildings are on both sides of the street, and I think there's things that can be done, some landscaping and other things, but not a huge amount. I think we can go back into the plan and insert Willow Street as a thing to improve, but I'm sure there's enough leeway and, you know, because there's a pretty big item here for landscaping and storm drains and some other things. I think it'd be covered, but we just need to cover it in the plan.
I think the question becomes, do we need to get the engineering group to the projection estimates to add this to our spreadsheet?
We can probably get it done before it goes to the city board. You know, is that, you think that would be okay, Tim? You know, I don't see, I think we could move some numbers around in here. There's some pretty heavy landscaping and some other things that can, but I think we do definitely need to go back and address it in the plan, and to insert that Willow Street would be identified as part of an eligible expenditure rate. And, you know, that'll take a little bit of editing to do. I don't know exactly where to put it without spending time on it, but we can put it in there.
And leave the same dollar amount.
Yeah, I think there's, you know, I've just been looking at, I think, you know, we've got some electrical pole relocations, different things, segmentation. There's, just on Oak Street, we've got about $93,000 worth of landscape. So, looks like it's, you know, there's some money in there. This was not a conservative budget.
So are you suggesting we keep the figures in there, but re-identify as Willow Street?
It is as an area that will, you know, Oak and Willow, I think if we just change the heading up at the top, that would do it. I'll second that motion that you made to change.
You want to make that as a motion? Is there a second? Okay,
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Are we clear on the motion? Okay. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, thank you. Anything else you'd like to see changed? Discussion about anything else? I believe the next step is to send the plan as amended to the planning board. We have to send it 10 days ahead of time. Their next meeting, I think, is Monday, January the 25th. So if we send it by Friday, we would be within that time. By this Friday. Unless they want to call a special meeting with that. Hopefully we get it on their agenda. Annie, can we get on the agenda for the 25th? Certainly.
I'd certainly welcome you sending this to the planning board so that we can move forward. I definitely think that we need to do that. But to expect the planning board to have the findings of fact in that short period of time, regardless of what the statutes say, I think is asking a lot. I mean, you've spent months and months and months on this, and they haven't even seen it yet. And how many pages is it? 150 plus page document that they have to go through and then adopt a set of findings of fact that this meets urban redevelopment law. I think would need a little bit more time than that. So if you could have it to me by this Friday or next Friday, I would certainly say we can get it on the planning board agenda, but I would much rather call a special meeting of the planning board to do that. in February, but not all the way at the end of February when they meet, to give them a little bit extra time to review the document.
They have 45 days to give their
Well, I mean, we can give
recommendation.
it to them at their meeting, and then they don't have to make a decision on it that night. And they can review it for the month and do it in February if that's okay. So, then that's when we can have it in their packets to give to them, and then have a meeting in February for them to adopt their findings and make their recommendations to the Board of Commissioners.
How long is it going to take to make these two amendments to it? As best I can tell, we're adding a line, as Mr. Yoakley stated, and then also substituting a replacement of Willow Street for the roundabout.
And that can be done by Friday. It's just the
You're talking about the after tomorrow?
Yes, the mapping, the financial spreadsheet is that's going to take a little bit longer, but can be added in there when we get it.
Can we send, if we accept it tonight, can we send it on the planning board with that to follow,
Yes,
to avoid the delay?
yes. Subject to, we can send it subject to the inclusion of what we know to be, well, I can tell you, there's a financial spreadsheet, there's 3 places in the document where the sentences that Mr. Yoakley talked about. And there are 3 maps in the plan document that just need to be addressed regarding the roundabout. We don't own those maps. We don't have those maps. They were done by the engineering group. We'll have to notify them and just get them.
Would you be comfortable if I made a motion that we submit to the planning board on January the 15th?
Can I just ask one question?
Yes.
Before you make the motion? If the plan is for the planning board to have the document but not take action at their meeting on the 25th, you could have the document prepared and delivered to the planning department on the morning of the 25th to distribute to them that evening, so that you're not rushing to finish those things up.
A common thread, what I've heard tonight, is to move on. Want to move and want to move now. And if appropriate at this time, I'll make a motion that we have it prepared and hold it to the planning board by January the 15th on that day.
I'll second that.
Okay, will that work, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, I'll distribute it to, even if I have it on the 15th, it'll still be distributed to them at their 25th meeting. That's what I mean, there would be 10 days additional before it's distributed to them.
Can I interrupt? And since there's some mapping issues that we don't have access to make changes, can, Mr. Armbruster, would you consider adjusting your motion to extend it to sometime to allow that engineering?
I'll rescind that and then make a motion that we submit it to them on the Monday the 25th.
All right, is there a second to that motion? Jerry? Okay, any discussion? All right, we all clear on the motion? Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, thank you. Is there any old business to be discussed tonight? Any new business? Okay, our next meeting will be Wednesday, February the 15th at 5:30, and we probably will be in the downstairs conference room. Maybe here we'll do a public notice before the meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn? Okay, is there a second? All in favor say aye. All opposed, thank you.